when you're looking at iteration design, if you're looking at things that you build, there's no single true way of building a process and doing iteration. And I think so many people, there's a lot of things like how to build a car, but there's like, this is how you build a car, not like that, like iteration. And the problem is like these different methods need to change depending on what you're trying to achieve. So if you're doing the R&D approach, this is kind of how you do it. You start with the engine, then you build the chassis, then you build the body, and right at the end of it, you get a car. And that's normally really, really expensive. It's normally not advised for software. It's normally not advised for tech. But that's exactly how you develop vaccines or the iPhone or something like that. Like that's a very R&D approach, which is totally legit. And it's an uncommon, but a completely legit way of doing innovation. Another one is to be problem focused. So in this example, you're focusing on how do we get customers from point A to point B or faster than walking or as quickly as possible. And you go with a scooter. This is like the MVP approach or the super minimal viable product approach. Then you get to a bicycle and then a motorbike, and then you end up with a car. The benefit of this approach is if you don't know that you need to end up with a car, which in most problems, people think they need a car, but they might need something different. You might get here to step 2 and realize that people don't need a faster bicycle. They don't want a faster bicycle as in a motorbike. They want a tandem bike. And you end up building minibuses and a transportation system. And so you might end up with a completely different, like a train network might be your final solution when you thought you might end up with a car. But you can iterate and learn your way to just ship a small version, ask the customers what they want, see what the feedback is, then design the next solution and build from that. And so if you're problem focused, it can branch and you can end up in a very, very different place, which can be incredibly useful if you're a startup trying to find where the real value is. Facebook and Twitter are both like this. Facebook started out as a hot or not and eventually a digital yearbook for universities, and then now it's got a whole bunch of stuff. Twitter started out as SMS groups, which is basically the same thing. Another MVP approach is if you validated that, yes, everything that they need is a car, and this is kind of to the question, the chat that I had with Luke, or to Luke's question, was like, yes, they want the car, but how do we just build the manual version of that? And how do we manually deliver what that looks like just for a small number of customers? Then how do we slowly improve that through an iterative process? So the iterations are all solving the same problem. So we're still heading towards the same end solution, but we're just delivering smaller pieces of that or much, much simplified versions of that towards the end thing. So WhatsApp or Slack were kind of examples of this. Slack has always been, I mean, once they spun it out of the gaming companies, it's always been the same thing of what it was. It's just been added features and it's just getting better and better and more. It's fulfilling on the vision of what it should be in a much more coherent way. So I just thought like this is just a thing that I like to play with people when they say like, oh, there's only one way to build a product, and it's like, well, no, there's a bunch of really just these are just 3 very, very different ways of what that looks like. So that is my very quick tangent on product innovation, and that there is no single way to do this. And that's kind of why thinking through the problem you're trying to solve, like, do we need to be problem focused? Do we need to be R&D focused and work out what the core is and then get patents and licenses and stuff? Or do we need to just, we know what we've got, all the data is telling us this is what it needs to build. That's a really big solution, and we can try and ship smaller slices of that in order to get to where you need to. So I would challenge you in your business or in your organization, every time there's a big feature, every time there's a big triangle of good, cheap, and fast, and you're trying to wrangle 2 and everyone wants stuff to build faster, think about how you can make that smaller. How can you change the way in which you're building products, the way in which you're thinking about products, the way in which you're making decisions around products? And if you can zoom out to that level, it normally becomes a lot easier to reorganize the product of things. So focus on product the way, not product the thing.